this country is at war with Germany.
We had to do a job, and we did the job, and that was it.
The men had to go and fight, and the women had to take their place.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode here on Foxhole Chat, and this is a really special one for us. We've got our first guest on, so today we're joined by Geraint Jones, who is was a former infantry soldier and did 3 tours on duty to Iraq and Afghanistan. For his actions in Basra, he was awarded the General Officer Commanding's Commendation, and then upon leaving the military, worked to protect commercial shipping against Somalia and Nigerian-based piracy before becoming a full-time writer and also a podcaster. He hosts the Veteran State of Mind podcast, which currently has over 200 episodes and covers everything from World War II history to talking to fellow veterans who served in modern combat. So yeah, it's really great to have you on, Geraint.
Thanks for having me, guys. And this is probably the first time I've ever come on and not had to explain how to pronounce my name. So
Yeah.
it's a first in many ways today. But no, I'm really excited to chat, guys. I'm really excited.
Yeah, good, sweet. So so me and Kay, we've both been working our way slowly through one of your World War II books, D-Day, The Unheard Tapes. I've really enjoyed reading it so far. I've got about 2 chapters left. I think it's really super thought-provoking, really gets you thinking. And straight away, it really sets the tone of it being a personal book, the stories of the men, rather than super tactical and battle driven. Obviously you cover that. But yeah, I thought it's a really good book, and I'm looking forward to reading your other one on the VE Day towards the end of the war as well.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, both of these books, and to be honest, what I do in general is, I've always been fascinated in military history, but it's been the memoirs that I've always gravitated towards more than your kind of big picture. This is how many tons of supplies we had. This is how many ships we took it to go to A to B. I think those books are very important, and I wouldn't be able to do my job without having those big picture books to base these stories around. But really, for me, it's I want to write about the kind of stories that you might have heard on your granddad's knee, or maybe if in modern times, it might be the kind of stories that a friend would tell me in the pub. It's those kind of things, because I always think with history, yeah, the big picture is important, but why do these things matter to us? Why do they move us? Well, because they're human stories, and if these things, and in war, one of the most terrible of human endeavors, it is so awful because it affects human beings. So I want to know the human side of the story. So particularly in that Normandy book, it's called D-Day, but I cover the whole Battle of Normandy because this isn't a dig, but obviously when it comes to publishing, publishers like a nice clear title like D-Day. It sounds terrible, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but there is branding when it comes to World War II, as I'm sure you're both aware.
Yeah.
D-Day, strong brand. Arnhem, strong brand. That kind of thing. It puts it on, and people pick up those kind of books. But the book itself is about the Battle of Normandy, because as you well know, it wasn't a case of getting up the beach, job done. There was months of slog, very costly slog ahead. So yeah, that's what it comes down to for me, really. It's all about the people, and that's what fascinates me, and that's what moves me, and that's what I try and pass on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice. You said you always had an interest in the military history. Did that come from your time in the forces? Was it before? Did you take it on in civilian life afterwards?
No, it's been before, to be honest. I can go into my theory on this, right? So I have a purely pro science backed theory that, and this is just based on having talked to a lot of veterans, having read a lot of veterans' work from other wars. There seems to be something in certain people where they have just gravitated towards soldiering and soldiers from a very early age. Now, you can use the nature nurture kind of thing in this and be like, well, is that because they had a granddad who used to tell them all exciting stories and things? But quite often you can look at a family of maybe 3-4 boys, and obviously like these days, now that roles have opened up to women in combat as well, I'm sure it's probably the same there. But it's been, you know, you could have the same upbringing and the same parents, the same grandparents, and you know, kids go in totally different directions. And it seems to me that there's something maybe in someone. And speaking as a writer as well, there's always something in me that I wanted to write. So soldiering and writing for me, these were non-negotiables in my life. I'd have to be doing them one way or another. Now, I'm very lucky that I get to do the writing professionally, but if I wasn't doing it professionally, I'd still be doing it. If I wasn't doing these things, and if I hadn't got to soldier, I think I would have gone mad. Madder. So, you know, it's and maybe you have to be mad to want to be in the infantry in the first place. That one is definitely an arguable point. But yeah, I've just always been fascinated by them. And again, putting my writer's head on here, you know, I'm sure anyone listening, right, if they think of their favorite movies, like, so a few of them, a lot of our stories, they follow the same arc, right? It's the hero's journey as broken down by Joseph Campbell. And why is it that story resonates with people of every generation, from every continent? And like, you know, you could pick up books from thousands of years ago now, stories from thousands of years ago, and they fit that same arc. And I think that has to be intrinsic to, there's something in it somewhere that relates to that story. And with that being the case, you know, I think, well, if there's certain things in us that we're all drawn to as people, then maybe again, I'm speaking purely bro science here, maybe there's something in our coding that a certain amount of people are just programmed a different way. Like, I don't know if you guys have got siblings, you know, I'm sure, you know, you could love each other, get on great, but be very different people, and you've come from exactly the same place and exactly the same DNA and everything. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that I started reading a lot of books when I was younger. And I've never stopped. I've always been fascinated by war. As I've got older, I've started to realize why some of those things are. And I think it's because in war, you see the spectrum of human behavior really kind of like its most extreme ends. Because you see the best of human behavior, self-sacrifice, you know, putting others before yourself. Strangers, you know, often strangers, people risking their lives for strangers. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people enjoying killing for the sake of killing. You know, you've got genocides, people, absolute pure hatred of another group of people that really you have no reason to hate, but we can see how people get programmed. We can see how people get swept up in these kind of frenzies. And I think, so if you're interested in human beings, I think war is a great way of looking at them. And if you're not interested in human beings, you probably shouldn't be interested in writing, because when you boil it down, like that's what makes good stories is digging into what makes us tick as human beings and how we behave.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think for us, the people who are afflicted by the Second World War, when we're reading these books, like some of the ones that I've read in your Normandy book, like I find myself just sighing and going, "Oh my God," you know, describing kind of like the scenes of horror, and you kind of relate to, well, how would I react in that situation of seeing that? And you think, you know, these guys are 18, 19, early 20s, a lot younger than me. And I think, you know, God, you know, would I ever have the courage to do something like that? You know, we live very privileged lives nowadays compared to going through something like that. So I try to look at it from that way of, you know, you might be struggling in life nowadays, you know, bills, etc. But sometimes it's about putting it into perspective, I think, and reading history books definitely does that. It kind of brings it home and you know, really grounds you, I find anyway. And I guess, would you agree it's a bit like Eric Bana's character in Black Hawk Down towards the end of the film, and he says, you know, people ask me back home, you know, why'd you do it, man? Why'd you do it? You know, are you addicted to war? And he's like, I don't say anything because they won't understand. You know, it's about the guy next to you. I think that comes into it for sure.
I mean, I could give a very long-winded answer and still not give an answer on this one, because you know that old Vietnam kind of quote of like, you weren't there, man.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you weren't. And it's like, as much as I can try it and relate to soldiers in the Second World War, you know, I mean, I've been shot at, I've lost friends, you know, I've seen nasty sights, still haven't landed on D-Day, you know, so it's, you can never go through it. But I think one of the things as well is, like, and this is something personally that's only come to me as I got older, is a bit more empathy for people. And I think that's a lot of it, is just being able to, like you said, because part of it is like, how would I react? That is a big part. But then the other part as well is just being empathetic to and putting yourself in other people's shoes. So even if it's not wanting to know how you'd react, to just be like, that could have been me, that could have been my brother, that could be my dad. And that comes when we're talking about, like we were saying, that horrible end of the human spectrum as well. Every one of us, I believe, has the capacity to go down a very dark road. I think it's in all of us as humans, some more than others. What we go through in life will you know, kind of dictate that. And I think once you start being open-minded and realizing that, you know, maybe the reason that you are, you can kind of be you can look at your life now and say, you can look at back parts of history and say, well, I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have got swept up, I wouldn't have got swept up in this, and I would have been the person who said, no, send me off to the gulag because I'm not doing what you say. The reality is, we probably go, a bit cold at the gulag, innit? I don't fancy a bit of that, right? Whatever you say. Yeah, my bloody neighbour. Yeah, you know, he's not paying for his Wi-Fi. Get him off to the gulag. You know, it's, you know, I make a joke of it, but I think, you know, that's just the reality of the situation, because that's how we end up in these situations. Most people will go along to get along. Yeah. You know, and you know, it's also difficult when we look back on these stories as well, because we think about the war side of things. We always forget people had a life before the war too, right? So it's kind of, it can be quite hard for us to put yourself, for instance, we look at the First World War, that level of patriotism for people to just, you know, you might have been like, nowadays, if you think of somebody that you know who's like, let's say, they're an aspiring artist and they spend their day drawing pictures and they write lovely poetry. To imagine that person go, well, the king needs me to go and bayonet people, I'm off. You know what I mean? It's just so hard for us to imagine that. Now, we've all got friends in our lives who are maybe a bit nuts, and you think like, oh, I can see why he joined up for an adventure, or he loves doing MMA, so I could see how he'd want to fight. But for just across society, all different levels of class, different levels of education, to have that kind of just that group thing of, yeah, well, of course we're going to go and take, and for people to be heartbroken if they got a reason that they couldn't take part. You know, people lying about their age because they're too young. It happened with people who were too old as well. That doesn't get talked about a lot, but there's people who lied about their age on the top end to get into the service. You know, I'm 42 years old now. You know, to think that there was people around my age, you know, lying to get under the age limit and going off with these younger lads, to leaving their older kids behind and being a bit older and wiser in life, and still saying, oh yeah, of course I've got to go, it's patriotic duty. So I'm just using patriotism as one example, but you know, when we think about the experience and put ourselves in these people's shoes, one of those experiences can be, God, what would it be like to be in the landing craft when the ramp came down? But the other experiences as well is, what was that like that got you in there in the first place? And what was it like to be around those people? Because, you know, you can have some negative thoughts on this and say, well, it might have been better if everyone wasn't so patriotic. We might have avoided the slaughter in the trenches. But, you know, there might also have been something amazing about having been, like, I love going and watch a football. Got a little Wrexham pin on here. I mean, I'm not fair weather fan. I have proof. I have tickets from when I was 8 years old. I can show you.
Amazing.
But you know, to have been a part of something that everyone believed in, like, you know, we're not as divided as what we're shown on our social media. That's not the real world, but we do live in a quite divided society. People have a lot of different ideas on all kinds of things. And it must have been quite amazing to have been in a country that was so focused singularly. And it wasn't 100%, of course, but an overwhelming majority of people like, this is our mission. Because that's what one of the things that soldiers, myself included, say that they miss about the military is, especially when you're on operations, is we've got a job. We've got a reason to do it for each other. We can't drop out of this because there's real world consequences to our friends. And to have that, you know, I'm sure you've come across them. The one I always think of is George MacDonald Fraser, you know, at the end of his book, Quartered Safe Out Here. It's a great memoir. If people haven't read it, I really recommend it. You know, and he's kind of saying, like, reflecting on the war. He's like, you know, there's days where he's working in his office, he looks out the window and thinks, God, I wish the war was back on.
Yeah.
You know, because of the way, not because he missed the violence or anything like that, but because of the way everything was so united and everyone was on the same page. Sorry, mate, I can't remember what the question was.
That's all right. It's all good. It's all good. No, like just a laid back chat that's just about the war. And I think I don't know about you, Katie, but I found, like, I've not been in this hobby for long, like involved in World War II and history. It's always been there. But, you know, doing stuff like this, like talking to you, like 6 months ago, I would have called you mad if that would have happened. And it's just, you want that kind of sense of belonging and a nice community that you can share, you know, like-minded people with. And I guess that's the most concentrated with soldiers, I guess. So I think history is amazing for that sort of thing. So with that being said, what part of history do you find yourself coming back to the most? Is it the World Wars, or is it, because I know you write books about the Romans as well?
I think it goes in phases, mate, honestly. There's been periods where I've been very interested in Vietnam, for instance. Still am quite interested in Vietnam. I mean, it's got the best soundtrack of any war, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, but no, like, Vietnam is a fascinating one because of the way, by that point, you know, to keep on this whole idea of people, that was an overwhelming kind of negative effect. So it's almost like the polar opposite of what you've got in the First World War, and changed the country that way. So that's always interested me. The Romans have interested me. The ancient Greek stuff interests me. First World War and Second World War a lot. And I've never really been interested in your War of the Roses kind of period, that kind of thing. It's never really gripped me. But I do find, put it this way, right now I'm working on a book about Basra in 2006, 2007. And the reason I'm working on this book is because that especially that last year of the war, it was well, people don't, it wasn't technically the last year of the war, but it was the last year that our troops were in Basra long term. They did pop it. They did go in and out on operations after that, but it was the last time. Excuse me, just go to clean nose.
That's all right.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
It's pretty cold out here. But that was like the last time that we had, like, you know, troops stationed at Basra Palace, Old State Building, these kind of places. And because Iraq was a bit of a poison chalice, it was never really covered in the news. And when it was never really covered in a way that actually was realistic. And at the same time, we just gone into Helmand Province, 3-para battle group. And that was a very easily pitchable, sellable war to the public. Taliban bad, British troops good. Here's some footage of them with A-10s, which, you know, I'm all for because I love A-10s. But the British one, on the other hand, was, oh yeah, we've established peace and democracy, and now we're going to do a peaceful handover, and we're just going to leave, because the reality was very, very different. And I was there at the time, and that was a very bloody tour, not for me personally, but for the troops that were out there. And I feel an obligation to do that book because I'm very lucky to know people who were in the different units. So I've been able to use the Old Boys Network to reach out and get people. So I want to put together an oral history on that because, I'm not saying no one else will ever do it, but I also think, like, well, no one else has so far. So better get on with it because we ain't getting any younger. But there is this part of me, as I'm sure you've probably noticed from my Substack, little plug to anyone who wants to read these stories on there. I started a Substack with the idea of all the stuff that I've researched for books that I can't fit into a book. I can just put on there because I don't want those stories to just not get told, so I can put them in there. Hasn't worked out that way. I'm like, oh, what's this little rabbit hole? And I'll go down it, and then before I know it, writing that Substack article has taken the best part of 2 days, which is a great sign as a writer. You want something that you become obsessed with. I have a few World War I, World War II books that I want to do. Once this Basra book's done, I feel like I owe that to the people that I served with to write that book, and I'm hoping it will make the British public a bit more aware of what's going on. We've got a great publisher on board, so I'm very excited about that project. Don't get me wrong, but I have some of them right in front of me here. Big stack of books that I'm waiting to get in on and start researching the next ones. There's a couple of unit histories that I really want to do. There's some campaigns that I really want to do, and again, it's all going to be as in the words of the people who are there as much as possible. So what I'm trying to do is find these stories that can tell experience, like you're saying. What would it be like? What would it be like to be there? How would I feel in those situations?
Absolutely.
Let's find out as much as possible.
Yeah, that all sounds amazing. That all sounds amazing. I can't wait to read them.
Well, give us 10 years or so, mate. I need about 10 years to finish the ones that are on the plate at the moment, and then we'll see what comes next.
Amazing.
So obviously, being a soldier has been a major part of your life. Is there any part of being a soldier that you've taken into your everyday civilian life?
I complain a lot. So that's it's a good question, Kate, because on the surface, there's not much similar, right? Soldiering, particularly in infantry, especially when you're operations, very physical job, and it's about a kind of really like the pinnacle of teamwork, right? You are in a team relying upon each other at all times. Writing, you're on your own. If you're lucky, you've got a cat, and so it seems on the surface to be very different, but I think that the reality is what you learn when you get into writing is that it is a team. I almost said sport, team effort. You've got the writer, but then you've got editors, you've got their assistants who are always involved in the project. You've got the marketing team, you've got the sales team, you've got the people who print the books, the people who package the books, the people in the supermarkets who stock them, all that. So to get what's in your head into a reader's hand is a massive team effort. You don't have as much contact with those people as you would do with your mates in the army, obviously, but you can build up really great relationships. Like my editor, Ingrid, who did the Voices of Victory, which is the Germany campaign book, and the D-Day book, which you're holding. She also did my Afghanistan memoir, Brothers in Arms. And she's also done some other books that I've worked on for other people. And she's become a great friend. And I love that, having that friendship relationship. Now, the next book that I'm doing, the Basra book, is with a new publisher, but I'm looking forward to that and becoming a new team working with those guys as well. So there's that. And the other thing as well, I heard this from like Rick Rubin, who's like that guy with like long hair. I don't know if you know him. He's like, does loads of stuff on creativity. This guy's had a hand in like so many of the, like anyone listening will know the work that he's touched, put it that way. And he had this really interesting point, which is that every piece of art that you make, so which is maybe not the right word to describe a book about war, but you get my point. It's all a collaboration, because you're collaborating with the authors of the past, because your style will have been influenced by other authors. In the case of a World War II book, you're collaborating with other authors because you might be using their research. You're definitely collaborating with the people who left us those stories. You're collaborating with the people who interviewed the people to get those stories. And then the final collaboration is with the reader, because every reader will come to that book with a different mindset, a different set of experiences of their own, a different set of expectations. So all across the board, a book is a collaboration. People can think it's a very insular thing. It's not. It could not be more opposite. The other things that you kind of take over from the army, when I first started writing, I had this impression that I could just be drunk all the time, bang out a few words and get paid. And I tried that for a bit. It was great fun, but it was not productive because once you've got a little bit in and you're on your third, fourth drink, you think, I'm going to go out. But no, and this isn't what works for me. I know some people that do prefer writing before, drink before they write. Personally, I like to treat it when I'm working. I'm totally sober. That means no drinks the night before. It means definitely no drinks when I'm writing. Get up early and get to the desk and start writing. And I'm not going to say that it's regimented to the minute or the hour or everything like that, but it is. You have to be disciplined about it. And particularly, like, you know, it's. I'm not going to say writing doesn't pay well, because it can pay extremely well. But I always think of it. It's a bit like, say, football. You've got some people who are on massive wages at the top. And then you've got people who might play for a local club who get, you know, the travel costs covered and that kind of thing. And there's a whole spectrum in between. So in order for me to become a professional writer, I couldn't just go, here's my book. They'd be like, yeah, but who are you? What, you know, like, we'll pay for you, but we're not going to give you a full-time job on that. So it's like, okay, well, how can I make it a full-time job? Well, you can ghostwrite for other people. All right, how many books do I need to do a year to be in order for me to get my foot on the ladder and start working my way up it? And then you're like, oh, right, I'm actually going to have to be really regimented in how I do this, because otherwise I'm going to miss deadlines. The work's not going to get done. And if you want to get repeat work, hitting a deadline is a good way of doing it. You know, hitting your deadlines, giving the work in at a standard that people are expecting. And I'm not going to say that I enjoy taking criticism, because I don't. I hate it. But I understand that it's a really important part of writing a book, or, to be honest, doing any job in life. Now, if you have taken criticism from a burly corporal from Glasgow who took a dislike to you the moment he first set eyes on you, and nothing will ever change that, if you can accept constructive criticism from him, then a very politely worded email from an editor is not going to faze you. It might hurt your ego for a bit, but it is not gonna bother you. So I think that ability to debrief, because one of the things in the military that you do, everything you do, it's one of the great things about the military, is you debrief. How did that patrol, like, so it's not just a case of you get off patrol, how did that patrol go or whatever. It's right, this is what we could have done better. We should have done this, we should have done that. What were we missing? What piece of equipment would have been useful? What was not necessary? You know, you're looking for ways to improve all the time. So outside of what your editor tells you, I think you just get in this habit of self-debriefing. That can get to the point of being crippling. If someone, I know certain friends of mine who are just like always too hard on themselves, because everything is, it's, instead of going, well, this was good, it's right, never mind the good, what was bad? Because what was bad in the army and on operations can get you killed. So what was bad becomes very important to learn. Ain't the end of the world on a book. You know, it's always good to try and be better, but it still takes me sometimes. Still, I take the negative and inflate it more than it should be, just because of, you know, just over the years. It's, you know, especially when you're in your early, because as you know, as you guys probably know, when you're in your early 20s, your brain is still developing everything, right? So if your early 20s have been spent in, if I do something wrong, this could get me killed, you know, you have to kind of unlearn that most things will not get you killed. And therefore your reaction and your emotional reaction needs to be appropriate to, you know, what that cause of alarm is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, me and Katie just make YouTube videos as a hobby, and you know, I'm sometimes hard on myself. I'm like, oh, I wish I'd edited that a bit better. I wish I included that fact or whatever. But I think, you know, yeah, you saying that kind of puts it into perspective that, you know, not getting, you know, millions of likes on YouTube is it's not the end of the world, and we do it because we enjoy it and we want to keep the stories alive. So with you talking about your book and the teamwork and stuff, so when you were researching your World War II books, what surprised you the most when you were going through the first-hand accounts? What really stood out to you?
I think we all know how awful D-Day was. I didn't realize just how awful every day was that followed that in Normandy. One of the examples I always go to, everyone's heard of, or well, especially listening to this podcast. So this might be a bit different actually, because you have learned scholars tuning into this, and maybe they go, "Yeah, of course I've heard of that." Okay, well, just try and put your mind itself in the mind of someone who isn't really a military history buff. You know, they've just got a general idea of the Second World War. They've probably heard of D-Day. They might have heard of Sword Beach, Omaha Beach, you know, etc. They've probably not heard of Hill 112 and the fact that a division was basically, suffered 50% casualties in the space of a couple of days. And when I say 50, we're talking thousands upon thousands of casualties here. And when you account for how much of a division is made up of infantry, we're talking an insane rate, which, holds up against the same kind of rates that you'd have on the first wave on Sword Beach or Omaha Beach. And nobody knows about it. And if you go and visit Sword Beach, you'll see a lot of people walking around looking at memorials. Now, there is a memorial at Hill 112, but you'll see a lot less people there than you will do on the beaches. I always say with this, when it comes to war and anniversaries and things, it's not really competition, right? But I do believe we should try and make it as much of a level playing field as possible. Because if a soldier is killed taking a farmhouse in Germany and he's the only casualty that day, is that his death any less important because there weren't another 600 people killed that day? Of course not. And that's why I never like this. Well, that battle was worse. Not that it was worse for a lot of families, but you can't say it was worse. We still lost. There was a life lost. There was a family who lost someone forever. His friends had to live with that forever. So I've never liked this idea where people try and grade things with like a scale of like, well, yeah, but it wasn't that many people. I hate the term light casualties. Light for who? You know what I mean? I've never and I get it. I get that people, you have to kind of give some kind of context to things. And maybe it's the right term to use. I just personally always just grips my shit because I always just think, and this might just be me, I just think it sounds dismissive of people. I always just think, give the number. Yeah. Casualties were X, casualties were Y. You don't need to say heavy, you don't need to say light, just casualties were bar. And I've probably done it myself, but it's something that I try and avoid now because I always just think, like a casualties. One is too many. One is heavy, in my opinion. So yeah, it was this. So that, like, say, the ferocity of the fighting around Caen. The fact that these British soldiers, many of them seeing combat for the first time, were going up against SS Panzer divisions. This wasn't. We're going up against an Ost battalion, many of whom want to surrender at the first opportunity possible. It says these are believers, and they're skilled and they've got good kit, and they've got more experience than you in a lot of cases. So there's that. And then with Germany, I think it was just that everyone kind of has this impression of the Germany campaign being this great big, what they call the swan across Germany. We've got them on the run. Just chase them all the way back to Berlin, job done. And there was a breakout where big advances were made and large numbers of enemy troops surrendered and were captured. But this was right towards the end. The campaign into Germany, so this is like towards the end of April. The break into Germany happened at the beginning of February. We're talking 3 months here. Now, 3 months if you're in combat is a long bloody time. And that initial battle to break into Germany, I forget the exact distance off the top of my head. I think it was about 15 miles. Put it this way, it's about a 20-minute drive today. It took 30 days to do that. Now, 30 days across quite a narrow front involving multiple divisions to cut. That says everything you need to know about the strength of the resistance and the ferocity of the resistance. The conditions were terrible. And another one as well, I actually saw a comment on Facebook earlier about someone saying about how great the British Army was by the end of the war. And there's some truth about that. Things always improve as you're going along. But if you read for a lot of the kind of accounts from the people who were there, they'll say, well, yeah, that's kind of true at the top level. But at the bottom level, the casualty rate, the churn of guys coming in, replacing other guys, towards the end of the war, they had to simplify their tactics a lot, because the guys they were getting in, you're getting a guy who's done his basic infantry training, which was, I think, 10 weeks altogether, basic training infantry. I might be wrong on that, but I'm thinking 10 weeks off the top of my head. He gets out there, put into a replacements camp. Right, we need 8 people for Devon Dorsets. Oh, well, sorry, it wasn't Devon Dorsets back then. 8 people for the Devons. Come here. Right, you're in that section, you're in that section, you're in that section. We start a company attack in 10 minutes. Looks like I've never done a company attack in his life. You've probably done some training. And because of the amount of replacements that they had in, because of the massive sorry,
that's all right.
Put the policy. The massive loss of leadership, officers, experienced NCOs, so many of those guys learn. You could have, for instance, you could have someone who's a private, comes in as a private, goes through his first attack, demonstrated some leadership ability. Well, this Lance Corporal's dead, so you could take that Lance Corporal spot. Up you go. Next battle, he's knocked up to Corporal. Battle after that, he's up to a Sergeant now. And a month later, he's commanding a platoon as a Sergeant. He's never been to Sandhurst or an officer training course, but now he's a platoon commander. And because of all this, it meant that the tactics had to be kind of like there was a lot less complexity that you could use in your tactics. And some of the officers even went as far as to basically say that we were reduced to using First World War tactics. It's right, the enemy's over there. We got tanks here to give us fire support. Everyone get up. We're moving towards the enemy. It was that kind of thing. And that kind of staggered me, because I'd always been of that belief of, it was the same in the First World War. As wars go on, your protocols become better, units get to better, like different parts of the army get better at working with each other. How do tanks work with infantry in this environment? How can we work better with the artillery? How do we coordinate with the Royal Air Force? And as you know, Royal Air Force were really instrumental in the Second World War, particularly in Northwest Europe. They really helped to tilt the odds in the British favour. Well, again, this break-in battle to Germany, with the weather being as bad as it was, kind of like the Battle of the Bulge for a lot of that, you can't use air power. And when you're fighting to clear through a forest at something like 40 kilometers square, you can't use air power in a forest. How do you mark your targets? So there's all these kind of things that just work together to pull down the almost take away those advantages that you had of technology and of working at a higher level, perhaps more efficiently. But when you got down to it on the ground, it came down to who's more willing to get stuck in with a bayonet was a lot of the time. And this kind of or what would you call it, like regression to almost First World War tactics. And that necessarily, I came across a story of someone having to kill the enemy with a shovel, and I was like, God, that's brutal and that's unusual. And then I came across another, and then I'm like, and then when you're considering how many sources I'm working from, I'm like, well, if I'm working from 100 accounts here, and this has happened 3 times, then that would probably lend to that this was happening all across the army rather often. And you just thought, it's a First World War thing. Well, clearly not, So I think that I think the British soldiers in that campaign, I think they're almost, the word's not hard done by us. That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's almost in a way, well, yeah, of course you made these advances. You had all this air power and you had, all this and all that. And it's like, it kind of takes away from them just how courageous and tenacious they had to be to get the job done. Especially when you consider that at the end of the war, everyone knows by this point how the war is going to end, and blokes still had to be willing to get up out of their relatively safe bit of dead ground and to stick a bayonet on the rifle and get after the enemy, knowing that the war's going to be over in a few weeks. And they did it.
Yeah, yeah, it's mental. When you were talking then about the replacements and what they must have gone through, it kind of got me thinking, because you very kindly helped me decipher the little bit of research that I've got about my Great Tide, and you kind of think that he was a replacement in Italy. On the records that I've got, it says that he landed in April or May of 44 in Italy. And yeah, you just talking got me thinking then that, God, he will have done his, like you say, basic training here, and then he's gone from a small town in North Wales, and then suddenly he's dropped in Italy, and he's just expected to fight and get on with it in probably brutal conditions. And yeah, absolutely nuts, absolutely insane.
And quite often with a different regiment as well, which
Yeah.
people might not think is a big deal, but as someone who's been in the army, and even like in a later period than this, the regimental system is very important. Like your regiment means a lot to you. It's almost like an extension of your town or the region that you're from a lot of the time. Your dad probably, like Second World War guys, their dads probably served in that same regiment. Their uncles probably did. There's real ties. So you take someone all of a sudden, he's joined like he's joined the London regiment, and then the next second he's thrown in with he's a replacement for the 51st Highland Division. And he'd probably be like, it's now in Britain, we're a very homogenous kind of group, but things are a lot different about them. People didn't leave their towns and things that much. And all of a sudden, and I could speak as a Welshman who was in a Scottish unit in Iraq, it gets very difficult to understand them when they get excited. So just even things like that. But like, you're already a fish out of water, because this is probably the first time you've ever left Britain. Probably. You've probably not traveled that far from your home to begin with. And now you're with a bunch of people, you can't understand the word that they say, So all these experiences, especially for an 18-year-old guy, they all just add to it, because it's one thing to kind of go through an experience with people who your own kind of like that tribe. Well, we're all from North Wales or whatever, But then all of a sudden, they might seem as alien to you as the locals in France or Germany do.
So you've already touched on the camaraderie and your teamwork in your service. When you were doing your research on the first-hand accounts from like memoirs and interviewing veterans, I'm presuming you came across some camaraderie stories. Is there any that stick in your mind?
I mean, it's kind of a camaraderie story, because I think one thing that always helps build camaraderie is getting pissed. And stories of these tank crews going through Europe and basically turning their tanks inside their tanks into wine cellars was quite, because these people would be like wanting to give them something as a thanks for liberation. So, and then there'd be they might come across a little bit of loot here and there, and that they'd have these like empty racks just filled up with different bottles of wine and everything, and would get on it when they had the chance. That again was a pretty common story, and these guys get quite annoyed if their tank was hit and they had to abandon it and lost the stores that they build up. And then of course there's the stories that you come across of just people doing anything for their mates, or people, it was very usual for them to see losses and experience losses, but there was different levels of relationship, of course, so if you joined up with someone, or if let's say you joined together in 42 and you'd spent 2 years together in that build up before going to Normandy, you're going to have a different reaction to the loss of that person than you would do to the replacement who turned up yesterday, which is just the reality of it. There was also very sad stories about guys who had gone all the way, Battle of France, Dunkirk, then all the way across Europe, and their friend would then get killed right at the end of the war. Stories like that. And just kind of interesting stories to see. There was one guy in particular, Tom Gore, Cameroonians, and he would talk about how when the new lads came in, that they weren't dicks to them or anything, but they were like, they weren't comrades yet. And that came after they'd shown themselves in a bit of action, and how would they behave and things. And listening to his interview, you can see, because he starts referring to them differently as they go, because he brings it up directly and then starts to refer to it differently. So yeah, those would be the story. And you know, just sometimes you just get stories. I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but there's always the funny stories about what things get up to. There's always the joker in a company. Every company needs a joker. That's what there's. There was a guy from the Oxen Box. I remember him. He had a good passage about this, and he was just saying you need someone in a platoon in a company who's going to be that guy who, when everyone else is pissed off and sulking and cold and wet, there's going to be that one bloke that makes everyone laugh, and you have to have that bloke in every company. But again, you know, those guys aren't invincible either. And then, and when something happens to those people, then it can take a very heavy toll on the entire company because that person has become so important to them. But yeah, I mean, camaraderie, soldiering, it goes. Well, I always say it goes hand in hand. It certainly does in the British Army. But then sometimes, you know, you'll read about other armies and the way that people just desert people. Like we see it in Russia now, the way that they just leave their bodies and stuff on the front line. As a British soldier, I can't wrap my head around that. I always think of those Royal Marines who sat on the pylons of an Apache to fly in under fire to rescue the body of a fallen comrade. And I think I mean, don't get me wrong, that's an extreme example of bravery. But that, to me, I think of as very British. And then, yeah, you see this stuff in Russia, and they're just leaving people out, sending them out. And it's quite hard to wrap your head around that. But certainly in the British military, camaraderie and soldiering, again, comes down as one of the reasons why people miss it so much. It's very hard to find that again.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So going back to kind of battles from World War II, if you could witness one battle in person, which one would you choose?
World War II?
Yeah.
It's got to be D-Day, isn't it? I think let's not even make it about the battle. Sorry for changing your question.
No, go for it. No.
I always think like don't know if I particularly want to watch those people killed and stuff. If you know what I mean. I know that's not the intention of your question, but
no.
To see that amount of ships, that amount of people, the sky filled with aircraft of all different kinds. I mean, when else would you see that, really? You know, it's and I think maybe the place to have seen it from was from those, like, can you imagine, you know, one of those bombers, you know, you're flying over in the morning, or a fighter going over, you're doing the sweeps, and just seeing that. It kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about sorry, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah.
Too late now.
Yeah.
You know, just be like, fucking hell, like, we're all in this together. We're gonna do this. Because again, you gotta put yourself in their position. A few years ago, you were sharpening your broomstick, waiting for the Germans to turn up. Literally. Like that, you were like, okay, I need to make a pointy stick to take a German out, you know. And like now, you've got this armada, air armada, and an army all on the go. And you can to see that like basically spread across the horizon. And I have again, it's one of those ones where my experiences can slightly inform this, because I can remember before we did operations from outside of Basra into Basra, especially if we were up at the front, you'd climb up onto your Warrior armored fighting vehicle and you'd look back behind you, and it's just a long line, Challenger tanks, Warriors, Bulldogs, and it's just this long line of armor, and you're like, fucking hell, yeah, I've got to get amongst it here. And the reality, what really happened is 5 minutes later, I'm passed out in the back because it's so hot. You know, but that didn't change the fact that while I was on there, there was that fucking hell, let's go. And I think and that was like from a battle group's worth of armor. So to see all those forces like coming together, all that power, yeah, it must have been an incredible feeling, because like I said, you know, you'd been on the ropes, you know, and if you've ever been at a point in your life, as I hope everyone has, where you've had a dark time and come through, you know, things, you still got a hard road ahead, you know, it ain't going to be easy, you know, it's going to be horrible things that happen along the way, but you're like, the corner has been turned here, because, you know, you'd be thinking, mum and dad are going to be all right, my sister's going to be all right, you know, that's what you'd be, you know, you might not maybe articulating that in your head, but all that emotion, all that worry you had about your family and everything, you'd be thinking we're going to win this. You know, we're like, so I don't think anybody probably looked at Armada and thought, don't know if it's going to, you know, don't know if we're pulling this off. Do you know what I mean? I just everyone that I've heard of when they looked at that. Now, once they got to the beach, some of them had different different thoughts, you know. And there was also others who, once they got into the hedgerow country or the fighting around Caen, they start to think, oh God, is this just going to turn into another World War I? So that did happen, but everyone I've read, when they saw that, it was like, yeah, we've got this now.
Yeah, it's a bit like Al Murray says, you know, you've got to imagine what it's like from their perspective back then. This is like a sci-fi level kind of event where, you know, nothing like this has ever happened before. You've gone from the Wright brothers, you know, and then 20 years later, you know, you suddenly jump to 1,000 bomber raids, you know, Lancasters, Halifaxes, B-17s, you know, the leap in the technology and the amount that we produced, it must have been, just from a spectacle scale. That was the, like you said, my intention was never like, you know, the gore. It was just to be able to witness it with your own eyes. That was I get it, mate.
And and that is a great way of putting the sci-fi bit. Like, it could be more right.
So when you sit down to write your books or your Substacks, have you got a go-to soundtrack, like a specific film score, or do you just need silence?
Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer always kick off. If people are familiar with Hans Zimmer's Journey to the Line, I think it's one of the best pieces of music that's ever been made. And that is on repeat pretty much constantly when I'm writing. There's a lot of other Hans Zimmer tracks on the playlist as well, but generally speaking, Hans Zimmer, and then obviously if I'm writing my Roman stuff, then we've got to go for a bit of Gladiator, haven't we? You know, got to. But Hans Zimmer, and then a few other select kind of tracks from it. But generally speaking, Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think it's Black Hawk Down soundtrack. I've been quite obsessed with that recently.
I can pull up. I'll give you a sec. I'm going to pull up my writing. I'm going to pull up my writing soundtrack. Let's just do this scientifically.
Yeah, go for it.
As it is, it's at the top here. So we've got a lot of Hans Zimmer, some of the live Hans Zimmer. Oh, the Dunkirk soundtrack we've got quite a lot. The Sicario soundtrack, obviously. Sicario soundtrack, for anyone not familiar with it, fantastic. Then we've got Thomas Bergerson, quite a bit of him. And there's someone I'm into right now. It's like a bit of a, what's it called? You know, like the movie from the the music from the movie Drive, synth, but without the vocals, just the kind of synthy stuff. But I wouldn't be able to work to a war project with that. But for writing in general, I like that kind of synthy stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving to more like local stuff. What are your thoughts on the Walter Mitty situation that happened in Llandudno back in November? I hope that's not like too like triggering.
That don't bother me, mate. Like, I don't like things that should be able to be handled with common sense and being handled with law. So people are like, we need a law for stolen valor and this. No, we just need to be able to slap people who deserve a slap. And in that case, he needs a slap. Yeah. Like, I don't need the government getting involved in that and saying, we're going to give him this piece of paper and that. No, slap. And that's it. Like, and I think the world would be a better place if we got rid of a lot of paperwork and just, like, if you surveyed 100 people, 99% of people will probably come back and agree, yeah, just give them a slap. Like, if you're all right with that. The other thing as well, I will say on the stolen valor stuff, in his instance, like, there are people who are just kind of idiots and will do that stuff. I do think as well, though, like, sometimes, quite often with the stolen valor, I see people who are they've clearly got, I don't want to use the wrong term here now because I know these change all the time, but, you know, they're mentally challenged or mentally handicapped or something. You know, they're not doing it because they're trying to get away with something for their ego, or they're trying to, like, they're just not all there, you know what I mean? And when I see people belittling them and being nasty to them, that pisses me off way more than, you know, because basically you're just seeing an opportunity to be mean to someone who doesn't deserve to be mean for. And it's like, oh, I get to be mean to them now because they're one of these. Mind you, I just said that I'd slap the bloke, so maybe maybe I'm just being mean here too. But I think you get what I mean. So you can see the difference between the ones who are Waltz and Mitties and ones who are they don't know any better. Is kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I think it's the lack of common sense of, you know, you just can't wrap your head around, well, why would you want to do that? Like, you know, you just don't understand it. So just, try and slap some common sense into them.
I mean, look, and there are people with motivations to do it because, like, I don't know, like I've told people I was a dolphin trainer when I've been out on the piss in San Diego, you know, like, you know, I'm not saying I've never told porcupines, and I think there's some people who they just want to be special on that parade, don't they? But like I said, then there are a lot of people as well who I just think they want to be part. Again, they want to be part of something, and they're maybe not all there, and they think that this is how I get to be part of something, you know. So I think you've got to just make it. It's a judgment call, really. But and that's why I don't like laws for this stuff, because laws never really allow for judgment calls. They're always black and white, and I know. Snaps a bit of a slap. It ain't fatal. Like, just bring back the slap.
Yeah.
Being a veteran yourself, when you've been interviewing other veterans, whether it be World War II, Iraq, Afghanistan for your books, have you found they've opened up more to you with you being a veteran, that you've like lived through it, sort of thing? Because there's stories from families of World War II veterans saying, you know, Grandad didn't talk to us, and they've spoken to other veterans, and they've been having fluent conversations about what happened, where they were, and the family's like, well, we didn't know any of this because he won't talk to us. But because they're talking to another veteran, because they understand it more, they're a bit more open.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, it's just more difficult to talk to the people you're closest to a lot of the times, isn't it? Like, you know, you might, you know, for anyone who's ever ended up at a after party after a night out, you'll get people who have never met each other opening up on things that they've probably never told their friends or close friends or family. And I think part of that is the anonymity. It's what, you know, it's like the whole reason, like when people have one night stands more when they go on holidays to Ibiza or whatever, because they know that there's like that anonymity there and it's not going to come around. And I think when you're sharing something that's either been very painful to you or you think could be very painful to you, it helps to almost have that knowing that I might never see this person again. Kind of, I feel that plays into it, and I do feel as well that the veteran thing does. I know my own granddad, who was in Bomber Command, Lancaster Navigator. I've been researching his service and the crew that he flew something like, I think it was 7 or 8 missions, and then I can't find him on the logs again. Him and the bomb aimer both disappeared off the logs. And then the next day, the aircraft that they were on goes up for a test flight with a different crew, and it's a few weeks before the rest of the crew fly again. Now, me putting 2 and 2 together here, I think what probably happened is that they got hit by flak. My granddad was injured, the bomb aimer was injured, and then the plane was taken up for a test flight once things had been patched up. And then the crew started flying again once they got replacement navigator and bomb aimer. Now, on their first mission back up, they were shot down by a night fighter, and all but one were killed. My granddad never told me that, but he did tell me things like, before I went to Iraq, he'd say, make sure, he said, the most dangerous part of the mission is when you're on your way back in to camp. You know, when you start thinking about what's going to be in camp when you get back, that is the most dangerous part of the mission. And then when I looked into what happened to his crew, his friends, they got shot down by a night fighter on their way back into camp. And I think he was telling me without telling me, if you know what I mean. And there was other stories he told me, and he certainly opened up to me more. And I always remember when I came to visit him, he was basically on his deathbed in hospital when I got back from Iraq the second time. And I went in and I told him what we were up to and stuff. And he said, "You're going to get yourself killed." And he didn't mean it in a nasty way or anything like that. But I think he could see in me that's still that same kind of excitement for it that he'd probably had himself and his crews had. So there was that from him. And then, and I know that in the family, that it was really only me that he talked to. My grandma used to tell me before he passed, she's like, "I always wondered what you two would be talking about when you were in the other room, and you were the only one he talked to about that kind of stuff and things." And, you know, so I think maybe that was part of it. Maybe it's just because I was asking, like might have been the other part. I'm sure I was insufferable. You know, because I mean, at the end of the day, despite his experiences, he always loved aircraft. So I'd take him to the museums and things like that. So it could have been nothing to do with the military. It could have just been because I went to museums and stuff. Who knows? And then in terms of interviewing other people, it's that all, but again, it's that term, all boys network, isn't it? A lot of ways. It's you know, when I've been asking people to take part in this book about, you know, if you're going to trust someone with your story, you know, that trust is important. And the British Army is a very small place. Chances are you've crossed paths with someone. In fact, I tell you what, recently I was down in London, and one of my friends in London, he's a former Marine Corps, American Marine Corps officer, US Marine Corps, I should say. And I said to him, "Oh, we're going to meet my friend. One of my friends is a DJ, and one of his friends is also a former Marine Corps infantry officer." And he said, "I bet we'll know some people in common." So they sat down, got chatting. Sure enough, "Oh yeah, I know such and such." They had all these common people. And then Mike, who is the guy that we were meeting, he's like, "I've got a friend coming over, another Marine Corps officer." "Oh yeah, I know such and such. I know such and such." And then I was like, "Oh, I know such and such." And four of us who were in London, you know, separately, really, sat down and over a few drinks, realized we had all these points of contact. Now, why is that important? Because, again, it comes back to what we were speaking about earlier. War operations shows you at the extremes of your character. If you are going to desert people when times are tough, that's going to come out in war. If you are going to do the difficult things, that's going to come out. Most people probably end up somewhere in the middle. I'll probably put myself in there. But you can know if someone's a solid guy. Is he a good guy? Did he have a reputation of, you know, was he a coward? Was he nuts? You know, like whatever it was, you can kind of get that. So I think that's part of it as well. And, you know, it's just, again, I think if you are a soldier, a big part of your identity is being a soldier. So it's probably just the same as if you have been a professional rugby player, you will talk to someone who's a fanatic about rugby in a different way that you might do. Someone's like, "Oh yeah, I've watched a few games of rugby." Like, why would you, if someone's like, "I've watched a few games of rugby," why would you give all these passionate speeches and open up about how much rugby means to you if you just think, "Well, you ain't going to get it, so why am I going to bother?" You know, I think it's kind of as simple as that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find that like talking to people in work or talking to my girlfriend, it's like, you know, they're supportive because they're my friends, but then, you know, it's really mean people like Katie and you who, like, you know, you fully get it. You understand why we're obsessed with you know, the Second World War and the stories that are involved. You know, it's like we were saying before, you know, you want that sense of belonging and you want to share ideas with like-minded people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's, you know, I believe that every human being has the potential to get along with every other human being, but there are tribes within tribes within tribes, right? You know, and I've just started using Facebook a lot more recently. The reason being is because I've absolutely loved people commenting on things and sharing stories and, "Oh, you should check out this book and that book," and I'm like, "Oh, there's a tribe here that I hadn't really thought about." And I know, like, there's a message boards and stuff that are really important. I don't use them personally just because I already feel like I'm using too many digital things, and because I know I will get sucked into it. That's the thing, because I've kind of had a look and go, God, that looks interesting. I like get sucked into that, but it's just, you know, it's time, isn't it? You can't let yourself have everything. But no, it's great, and you know, like, it's when you're passionate about something, you want to share that with other people. You know, you want to help other people, you know, along the way. I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday. He's becoming self-employed for the first time, and he's like, I've been amazed at how helpful people have been. I'm like, yeah, because if they're passionate about what they're doing and they see someone else that wants to do the same, of course they're going to want to help you. They're going to want to spread that. I've got a little tangent here, and I think we kind of, like, everything seems to just be set up to make us feel like we have so much in different, like, everything's like, how can we highlight what's different about each other? You know, whereas the reality is, you know, there's always commonalities, and when you find those, you can always, you know, you can always find people who are going to want to share that commonality, help you along, give you their experiences, absorb your experiences, and yeah, I don't know, tangent here, but but yeah, there we go.
So about writing books about war, so mainly focusing on Iraq and Afghanistan here, can be quite challenging. Get them through editors and publishers, not from like a censorship sort of special ops who was where doing what that people shouldn't know, but more of a
You mean
what
they're going to say people aren't asked to read it? Is that what it's like?
like the little stories and tricks soldiers got up to inside the barracks and stuff. So I've got a lot of ex-squaddy friends, and some of the stories they were coming out with that they got up to in their quiet downtime, you know, doesn't tend to see public eye much.
No, it doesn't, and I think that's a shame, because soldiering is not shooting at people. That can happen in soldiering. There's people who might do 22 years in the army, never fire the weapon at someone. Does that mean that they weren't a soldier? Does that mean that they don't have experience as a soldier? Of course not. They've done 22 years as a soldier, you know. So soldiering is all those other things, like you're saying. It's that a lot, you know, a lot of it is extremely funny. Some of it is very dull. I didn't do a lot of years in barracks because I kind of used the TA as the back door to the regular battalion that I was in Iraq and Afghanistan with on my second and third tour, and I just particularly wasn't really interested in barrackroom soldier, the kind of barracks soldiering. But for some people, that's what they do, and that's what, you know, it is a professional army at the end of the day, and that's part of being a professional army. Is a lot of the time you're going to be in camp. When it comes to publishing, you're always kind of up against it in the sense that you are trying to give an idea, you're trying to teach people or share with someone an experience that isn't common. And that is a selling point, because it's like, look, here's this something that's different that you'll probably find interesting because it's different. But then when you're dealing with a you know, publishers, at the end of the day, they need to sell units, you know, they need to move units. So they have to look at it and be like, yeah, but is there going to be enough people interested in that thing? Because by its very definition, it's very different, right? So you know that you can look at it and go, right, millions of people tune in to watch reality TV. Therefore, if we do a book about this reality TV star, we believe that a certain number of that massive number will buy this book. Whereas when you're dealing with something like the army, they're like, well, there's not that many people in the army. There's not that many people who have families of people in the army. There's not that many people who are into World War II history compared to, say, reality TV. So are we going to sell enough copies to make this worth our while? And then the other side of it as well is, you know, like we kind of said at the beginning, there's that quote unquote branding. The SAS, great brand. SAS book about, you know, you could do SAS book. This is my SAS Jamie Oliver cooking book. It's got SAS in the title.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're going to get it sold, don't get me wrong, but you're going to stand a better chance than someone who was in the, you know, the Highland Light Infantry, I was like, well, he was interested in the Highland Light Infantry. Yeah, you know, do you know what I mean? So there's that as well. So, and like I said, publishers are business; they have to make business decisions. But you could definitely be up against it when you are trying to get books through the door, and it's frustrating because I think it's one of those ones where they'll say, well, you know, they'll say, you know, again, this is the business side of things. Well, we've got all these books about D-Day, so we know people are interested in books about D-Day. And I get that. You've got proof of concept. But then there's that part of me that thinks, but we haven't tried the other one, so how do we know it doesn't work, right? Because my thinking, I'm sure you guys agree, is we all have our quote-unquote favorite parts of World War II. But if you enjoy one part of World War II, you're probably going to be interested in a lot more, right? Like, I'm more likely to buy a book that's focused on the British in World War II, but I'm still going to go out and get books on American experiences and Soviet experiences and German experiences because I want to know it all. So it's like, yeah, it might have my focus, but that focus is going to spill over into a lot of other stuff. And, you know, I think, you know, it's if we don't put things out there, how do you build up that thing, you know, that kind of audience? Like, I see an opportunity in that. And to be honest, it was a difficult sell getting the Germany campaign done, because it was like, well, and the reason the book is called Voices of Victory is because I had to tie it around VE Day, because to convince the people in the stores that people were going to be interested, I was like, well, it's going to be VE Day, so stick victory in the title. If you read the book, it does, you know, the book is VE Day gets about 2 pages, and it's I think it was a 500-page book, you know, so it's about the 3 months leading up, but you have to kind of play the game a bit and be like, all right, fine, we'll put victory in the title and release it around VE Day. But then, you know, so you have to kind of use your nous a little bit about, right, how can we use these events that are going to be getting publicity on the TV? People are going to hear about it. Oh, everyone knows about VE Day, but they don't necessarily know about Operation Veritable. Okay, great. Well, now we can teach them about Operation Veritable because we've used VE Day as the hook.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of links to what you, Katie, said in, I think, was it our Normandy episode that we were talking about, and your gripe of how Normandy is so Americanized with the merchandise, you know, and you was it that you managed to find like one piece of British like shop or something like that?
Yeah, so when we go to Normandy, we always stay on Gold Beach. So that's a British beach. So if you go in all the little souvenir shops and stuff, all the souvenirs, they're all American. It's all Screaming Eagles, all American. I found a Royal Navy hoodie and an RAF bag in the entire town. That was British. Everything else was American.
And on Gold Beach too.
Yeah, on a British beach. And that was all I found.
Maybe we're just tired. Maybe no tired.
I mean, yeah, us British people in general, we're pretty tight with that one, aren't we? Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you kind of touched on it before, saying you've got some stuff in the works. So what's next for you? What are you working on that you're allowed to tell us?
So I'm sorry, I keep turning all these narrow questions into very big long answers. That's just kind of. I learned very early in writing that you've got to have a few projects on the go at the same time. You know, particularly if you want to do it professionally, because there will be long periods where you're waiting for people to get back to you on things. You know, so if you've written something, you're waiting to get the notes back on the first draft. You know, you might be waiting a couple of months. You know, because the editor's not just dealing with you; they've got multiple writers coming on, and you've got to fit into the schedule. So I kind of learned then that I was like, okay, I've got to have a few things going on. So if I don't have things that I'm working on, I'll find ways of getting myself into trouble. So I have to keep myself, busy. And so to that end, I always have what I call a slate. And on that slate, and this is a tip I got from my friend Stephen Pressfield, who he got it from someone else that was working in the industry that was kind of mentoring him. And it was like, you've got to think of yourself as an individual writer as a production company. And production companies always have a slate of different projects at different stages. So on your slate, you might have something that's literally, you know, we all love shower ideas are the best, aren't they? You go in the shower, always come out there with a brilliant idea. Toilet, another great place for it. Basically anywhere where you're away from your phone, funnily enough. So it could just be an idea, like, oh, you know what, I'd love to look into that. Or you know, you might read, you might see something on the TV and go, God, I'd love to know more about that. And then you might wake up in the morning and go, oh, I've got it. That's the story. And so you might just write that down, a few paragraphs, boom, that's on the slate. Then there's other things that on the other end of the spectrum, they might be deep into the editing stages. You might be on your second draft, your third draft, and so on. So I usually try and have a few things going on. I say a few things. There's usually 30 to 40 things going on at the time. Screenplays at different stages, books at different stages, now Substack articles. I've self-published books before, and I've decided that I'm going to start doing that again as well. You know, so what have I got coming out this year? So the next book that'll be published will be the 6th book in my Roman series. The first couple were done with Penguin, and then it's been a few years. I was doing like one a year, and then I got the opportunity to do the D-Day book, couldn't say no to that, so that pushed it off. Then I got Voices of Victory, you know, so I was like, that pushed it off. So I've been working on that, and I'm going to self-publish that. And the reason being is because I just kind of like want to do my own thing with it. Like when you're doing like a book through a publisher, they're going to want they're going to want a certain word count. They're going to want certain beats to be hit and things. And you know, I feel like people have taken a journey with me on these. This will be the 6th book. People have invested. You know, it will be like, let's say each book is 10 hours, right? Let's just say that. By the end of the last book, 60 hours that we spent together with this character, you know? And as we get to the end of that, I want to have a conversation with the people at the beginning of the book. I don't just want an author's note to be like, hey, here's the last book. Thanks for everyone's support. I want the author's note to kind of be a conversation. This is why I chose to do it this way. This is how I felt coming back to this last book than the first one. And this is why things have developed how they are. And this is what I've kind of learned from it. And this is, you know, like, and you can't do that when you're publishing through a publisher, you know, it just doesn't fit the format. So there's that kind of side to it. And then obviously we're all familiar with President Trump's comments last weekend that British soldiers were a little off the front lines. The response from that has been mixed, and some people have been made upset about it, which I fully understand, especially if someone had lost somebody, or fucking if you'd lost a leg or something. I totally get it. It was also nice to see so many people coming out and being proud of the service, and so many British people being supportive of that service. And I thought, well, I've got you know, out of my interviews, probably 60 interviews here with Afghanistan veterans. Why don't we take some stories out of there, put it in a book, self-publish it, and give the proceeds to charity? And now that I've said it on a podcast, I'm actually going to have to follow through on it. So well done, guys. Thank you for motivating me. So there's that. That's going to be coming ASAP. And then Basra book will be out in 2027. As I kind of mentioned earlier, when I first started writing, I was writing 4 books a year to kind of, well, not just to keep myself afloat, but, you know, to make a career of this, start building a name and that kind of stuff. This is the first time that someone's been like, right, here's the deal done. We'll publish it in 2 years. Because I'm like, well, 2 years, it's a long time, you know, but the idea being that if we have 2 years, the book gets to be better and better because there's more time to kind of go over it. It's a bit of weird territory for me because I'm usually like, right, 3 months, no problem, go, you know. So the Basra book will be out in 2027. And then I do have a new series of historical fiction, which I'll keep what it's about. But it's because the Roman series is obviously historical fiction. As much as I'd be able to, love to interview Roman soldiers. I did try it with Ouija board, didn't work. So yeah, that one I'm really excited about that one, because that is the series where I'm like, I'd like to write one of these books every year for the rest of my life with this new series. I haven't got a publishing deal for it yet, so whether or not whether I still feel like that in a few months remains to be seen. But in an ideal situation over the next few years, I'd like to be putting out one non-fiction book a year, which will be, again, focused on soldiers' experiences, and one fiction book. And the fiction books, they are all part of the same mission, because I'm really kind of focused on this idea of remembrance. And it's kind of a selfish reason behind that as well, because it helps me as much as I think it's important. I get a benefit from it. You know, I kind of joked about getting in, you know, myself into trouble. It's not kind of a joke, but also my track record kind of proves that is the case. So not always enough for me to just have a job. I need to have something that's like, I'm like, well, if you go off the rails and become self-destructive, you know, because I've had PTSD and all that kind of business. And I'm like, if I go self-destructive, it's not just me, it suffers. Now, it's never just you, it suffers anyway. It's just family and stuff. But, you know, I feel like I'm pissing on the memory of those people that I'm writing about if I'm not giving it my 100%. So by having these projects, the Substacks, for instance, if my option, I've got option A is writing about the life and the sacrifice of a British soldier. Option B is lying in bed with a hangover. Well, I've got to take option A, haven't I? There's no choice. So that has been kind of a big shift for me. Pegging work to purpose. And then also with the fiction side of things, you know, it's great. People like yourselves will pick up a non-fiction book, probably several, and maybe even put them on a big pile that gets read, you know, 6 months later. But a lot of people won't. And we still need those people to know about remembrance. We still need them to know what a soldier's experience. So you have to look. So I kind of look at fiction as a vehicle for that. So you can tell a fiction story and still work an awful lot of non-fiction into it, and trick people into learning about World War II history. Oh shit! Did I just give it away? Yeah, not World War II history. You can trick them about learning about any kind of history. But yeah, so that is the kind of plan with that. So making everything remembrance based. Well, not everything, most things remembrance based. And yeah, so that's I said, mate, it's just a lot of irons in the fire. Have some other things going on as well, obviously, with the podcast. The aim of the podcast has kind of changed over time, and now it's really at this point about not so much like, obviously I love the fact that people tune in and listen to it now, but really what I see the main effort for the podcast is to build an archive of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans and other conflicts too, but particularly Iraq and Afghanistan, because I think what the Imperial War Museum done, for example, is incredible. But the fact of the matter remains, if you're interviewing 80 people who are 80 years old, you're not going to get the same kind of reflections, memories as someone who's in their 40s. And wouldn't it be great if you could have that person at 40 and at 80?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And then see how, you know, what's stuck after and that extra 40 years and how are their thoughts and reflections changed. And so really it's about kind of doing that. Now, and the Imperial War Museums are doing that, I should add. They are interviewing young people too, but you know, the more the merrier is the way I see it. So yeah, those are the kind of main efforts, man. Yeah, that's kind of what we got going on.
Amazing. Well, you've obviously got talk coming up at Aces High as well. So are you trying to get more into that as well, more like public speaking and doing events like that as well?
No, I hate public speaking.
Oh God.
I hate public speaking, but the guys there were really nice and offered. And I hate public speaking. I say I hate it. That's not true. It's not true that I don't hate it. I don't seek it out. Put it that way, which, you know, when people see how much I've talked doing this, I think I can't believe that. I like my routine. I like my office. I like my books, and I think I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker. So I always think like I could probably make more impact with my fingertips than I can do with my gob. But if I get the opportunity and one more person can learn about, in this case, the Battle of Germany, then I can't say no to that, can I? Because one more person that now knows about it. And if you tell one person, they tell one person. We've all seen the diagrammy thing. So yeah, there's that. Like I will do it occasionally, but I don't go looking for it. And I'm always very grateful when I get the opportunity. One, because you get to meet new people, but two, it's a great chance, case in point, of meeting people that you've already been talking to, but brings a bunch of like-minded people together. Again, the whole tribe thing. It's getting the tribe together. So I always enjoy it when I do it. Always feel a bit nervous before doing it, which is I always find weird. I was talking to a mate about this the other day. So he was saying that I say it's not even a mate. I just follow him on Instagram. He's a Marine, and he's doing these videos. And I just messaged him to say like, hey, like fair play. You're doing great work putting these out. And he was telling me that he gets really nervous about putting these things out and stuff. And we were just kind of saying how weird it is, because neither of us would probably have an issue about, right, we think that's an ID over there. Can you go and prod it and have a look? Yeah. So, but then it's like, well, can you talk to these people who were very kindly giving their time up to come and see you? And we're like, whoa, that sounds a bit scary. I'm not sure about that.
I'll lay in on a secret. I don't know about you, Katie, but I was nervous talking to you, like on this, because me and Katie spoke before. Like, we were both saying, like, oh my God, we're going to get to talk to an actual author who wrote about the Second World War, a subject we both love and are obsessed with. And yeah, it's just crazy. Like you're saying about the tribes, like I said before, 6 months ago, I didn't know Katie, I didn't know you, and this subject has brought us all together. And I think that's we're able to share these stories and keep the stories going that we read about and learn about, and I think that's the most important thing that we can take from all of this.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. You did show it, but I think like we all get that imposter syndrome, don't we? Like everyone I know, like, well, with few exceptions, like, seems to get it, because I think that's one of the things with the public speaking, mate. I think like it's this duality thing, because on one side you realize how lucky you are that people want to come and listen to you talk, and on the other hand you're like, why the fuck would someone want to come and listen to you talk? Do you know what I mean? It's mental. Which is like it's weird, but like everyone gets like a lot of my friends I really look up to, and I just can't imagine them thinking like that, and they do professional speaking for a year. They're like, yeah, I still get really nervous every time I do it. I'm like, you're like in the special forces. Like, how? Why are you nervous about, people at a business that you're doing a motivational talk for? Like, what's going to happen? But it's I don't know. It's again part of the human condition, isn't it? Probably. Yeah. I mean, it's just really interesting how it's kind of like when I used to work in a gym, people would always say, I'm worried about people looking at me when I'm in the gym. And I'd always say, trust me, they're not worried about looking at you worrying. They're worried about you looking at them. Everyone's got the same thoughts in their head. And I think it's the same with this. We all have this same thing, because I'm like, oh God, I hope they don't think I'm part of this shit. And you're like, oh, I'm nervous. And it's like everyone's having the same thing. It's pretty interesting, mate. But I think it's amazing you're doing the podcast, man. That's why I was like, great opportunity to come on and talk to you guys, because like I said, like as much as writing is a team thing, sometimes it's not good to spend time with too much time on your own. It's good to chat about things. And also I think I'm very grateful for this opportunity, because I think you can have a lot of dialogue in your head about what you do and what's important to you and why you're doing it. But if you don't articulate it out loud, sometimes you can forget it. And it really kind of like when someone else asks you a question, it kind of brings it into focus a bit more. So I think it's you've done me a favor more than I've done you a favor. Put it that way.
We really appreciate that, and I know I appreciate you supporting my page. Yeah, it's always greatly appreciated. Yeah, Katie, have you got any more questions for Geraint?
No, I think we've covered everything we thought of. Anything from you, Geraint? Want to add? Anything we've not talked about?
God, I could go for bloody hours. How about we go through each individual book that I've got lined up along the shelves here and why I love them. I think it's great. Like I said, I just want to say thank you to you guys again. It's been great chatting. Kate, am I going to be seeing you, or are you coming down?
No, I'm working.
Okay, so definitely no more chats then. That's it, end the podcast.
No, yep.
No, it's been great, guys, and I think as well, I'm sure you're finding this, is that with social media and stuff, there's a lot of kind of weeds to get through. Like, it's going to keep throwing at you distraction and negativity and everything like that. And if you can like use Jedi mind powers to just stay disciplined on there and just look like, like, no, I'm not going to get sucked into this. No, I'm not going to get sucked into that negativity. Okay, I'm going to ignore that person who's clearly after a bite and concentrate on the good stuff. It's such a great like, networking makes it sound like businessy, but it really is, like, it's finding people, because like, there might be one or two of us in each village who thinks this way. And so you can think that, I just kind of like don't really have anyone to talk about this, but then using the kind of the social media and these other tools for like, for good. And I think if you do that, it can have a really kind of positive effect on your life. And yeah, case in point, you guys giving me an opportunity to talk. You didn't owe me anything. You've done me a great favor, and I really appreciate that.
No, we really appreciate you as well. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to your talk on Aces High. I know you smash it. I know you say you hate it, but
I need to make clear on that, because I always backtrack on this. I don't hate public speaking. I hate the anticipation of public speaking.
Yeah.
I will actually really enjoy it once we get into it, and I'll certainly enjoy having several beers afterwards. Like, I love that bit, but I do hate the anticipation. I'm gonna lie.
Yeah,
that bit I do hate.
Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that. But I'm sure you've got other mates that are going to be there. And I'll be there supporting you. So yeah, this has been absolutely amazing. I've loved every second of it. So yeah, thank you again, mate. We both really appreciate it.
Well, cheers, guys. Look forward to having a beer soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for people listening.
Yeah. Thank you for joining in as well. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe for more.
Yeah.
And go check out Geraint as well. Check out his books if some of those sound like they're right up your street. Go out, buy them, check out his podcast, Veteran State of Mind. And yeah, thank you very much once again.